Okay guys, this is Cole Morris, your instructor for Introduction to Internal Investigations. You know, from time to time I like to update my courses, keep them relevant, keep them interesting, maybe hopefully motivate you to continue your learning in security management and security type topics. And in this event, this particular episode, I'm going to talk about something a little bit more tactical rather than strategic. As you know, if you've taken the course, Introduction to Internal Investigations, you know that that course primarily takes a big picture, 35,000 foot view of internal investigations, very strategic type of point of view. Right now, today, I'm going to go into a little bit of the tactics, the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty of investigations, and specifically I'm going to talk about interviews and interrogations. Real quick, the difference between an interview and interrogation. Interviews are fact gathering. They're non-confrontational. They should be non-pressurized. They should be non-threatening. They should simply be there to get the facts of the case. Who, what, when, where, what did you see? What time did you see it? Who do you think it was? What time did the car leave? What color was the car? What was he or she wearing? You know, these types of things. And interrogation, on the other hand, is an exchange where you're not really looking for facts. You're looking for a confession or an admission of an event, of wrongdoing, for example. And so those are the two different things. Now, I will say in recent years, in the corporate world, they've tried to get away from the term interrogation. And I think this is probably for obvious reasons. It has negative connotations. It has connotations of harassment, abuse, maybe physical maltreatment, and all these other things. It goes through your head when you think interrogation. You think of the old cop movies, prisoners of war, and this type of thing. So interrogation, and well, today the terminology for a informational interview, okay, that is a interview where you're looking for facts, and then we have an investigative interview, and that used to be the old interrogation. As you can tell, they're much less threatening, especially investigative interview is much more, let's say, politically correct than the old interrogation, where you envision people with being beaten with, you know, rubber hoses and being waterboarded and, you know, all sorts of nefarious activities. So keep in mind the terminology. You might still be in an environment where interrogation is fine. I'm just asking you to be sensitive to those types of issues. Now, the next issue I want to bring up is interviewing or contact, regardless of what kind of interview it is, you want to interview people individually, one-on-one. Okay? It doesn't make any difference whether it's an informational interview or an investigative interview. It really doesn't. You want to interview people one-on-one, in private, confidentially in the workplace. Why? Because if you interview people together in pairs or threesomes or whatever, you're going to get a polluted information pool, quite possibly false or inaccurate statements of fact. Why is this? It's because they tend to pollute each other. They will look at each other and say, "It was a red car, right, Bob?" And Bob will say, "Yeah, it was a red car," when it was probably maybe a black car. But they tend to feed off of each other and reinforce each other, and that leads to bad results downstream as the investigative effort continues. So keep that in mind. Interview one-on-one. Don't think don't think you're saving time by interviewing two people together on a let's say one time I had a person interview two office workers who worked in an office where their office safe had been broken into over the Christmas holiday, and like $1,900 in cash was gone. And this subordinate of mine interviewed both managers, both office workers together. And I say, "Dude, what are you doing? You have to pull them aside, do them individually, and then compare notes and take further action if required." So keep that in mind. You're not saving yourself any time, and as it goes forward, the investigation, you're probably going to regret having tried to cut some corners. So keep that in mind also. Another thing I mentioned privately, these interviews need to be private. You need to arrange for an environment which is distraction free, or at least minimized of distractions. If you're doing this in a In an office, a business office, you want to make sure that the computer screen is turned off so people aren't, distracted by that. If there are windows with blinds, you might want to pull the blinds so people aren't, subjects aren't being distracted by activity out on the corporate campus. If there are landlines, you want to either turn them off or unplug them. Likewise, of course, with your cell phones and any other gadgets you might have, you want to deaden them. I've even seen cases where investigators have hung a do not disturb sign on the outside of an office to hopefully guarantee non-disturbance there on the interview room. Make sure you take plenty of notes, and if you're going to record the interview, whether it's a video or audio only recording, make sure the subject that you're talking to understands that you are recording it for future possible use downstream. And it, of course, that approach minimizes the requirement for you to manually take notes. Okay, guys, so before we wrap this one up, I just want to reiterate the importance of having your act together before walking into an interview room. Regardless of the situation, you've got to prepare for an interview. You've got to know what the goal is of the interview. And I'm speaking primarily here in terms of investigative interviews, but also informational interviews as well. What is the information you want to gather, and what is the goal of the interview? And have that mapped out. I would even have that written down in your notebook, and you can go down it step by step by step as you're talking to the other party. It's critically important. I can't tell you how many people think that this is going to be a piece of cake. They walk in there and the subject is going to comply or be authentic and honest with their responses, and they're just kind of like floating around like a balloon in the air, just blown to hither based on nothing, no preparation, no establishment of goals, no idea of what they're trying to accomplish, and it turns into just a one big wet mess, or maybe even a train wreck. So with that said, I want to thank you for your time and attention here. If you haven't already done so, please consider enrolling in the course Introduction to Internal Investigations. If you are already a student, I hope you got something out of this piece, and stay tuned because there'll be other updates going forward as I can muster the will and manpower and motivation accordingly. So until next time, I'm Cole Morris, and I'll see you around campus. Bye-bye.
107, pavilion, one lobby doors are locked. 105, copy. Keypad locked down. Employee, doors locked. Pavilion 2. 2's locked. Secure. 107, pavilion, one lobby doors are locked. 105, copy. Keypad locked down. Employee, doors locked.